Recently, I heard this claim on a popular health and fitness podcast.
If they increase their protein, will that do any good? Not only will it not do any good, right? Because it's not going to grow muscles for them if they don't move. It could actually be doing harm, especially in midlife. So what is quite consistent in the literature is that if people between the age of 50 and 65 get more than 20% of their caloric intake from protein, they're actually at higher risk of chronic diseases, especially cancer. So if you're essentially not active at all and you're in that midlife zone, increasing your protein intake with supplements or just because you decided that steaks are the best food in the world, like you could actually be doing way more harm than good.
If you fall within this age category and you've started to panic because you've just started your fitness journey and you've been increasing your protein intake, I'm going to explain exactly why you shouldn't be concerned about this and why your PT probably wasn't wrong if they've been telling you that you need to eat more protein than you currently are. So this traces back to one study which was conducted by Levine and colleagues and published in 2014. They used the NHANES 3 to collect data from over 6,000 people and tracked them over 18 years. So they used a 24-hour recall method to split them into two groups, the low protein and high protein group. And as we know, if you haven't tracked your food before, a 24-hour recall can be very hit and miss because people, if you've never tracked, will not necessarily do it the most accurate way. And is one day of data collection something that we can extrapolate over 18 years? Probably not as well. The baseline characteristics were also very different between the participants. For example, you were more than 2 times likely to have had a cancer diagnosis if you were in the low protein group. And in the high protein group, you were more than 4 times likely to have had diabetes diagnosis as well. So you can see that the characteristics are already showing a population is not healthy at baseline. But what was actually written on the paper is there was no association between all-cause mortality or cancer mortality and high protein diets. So where did this scary figure come from? It actually came from when they split them into 2 subgroups, which was the 50 to 65 group and the 65 plus. And if you were within that age range, it looked like high protein appeared more harmful than low protein. But what they did also mention is within the low protein group, there was only 219 people. So compared to the total amount of people within the survey, when you have a smaller group, the effects tend to look a lot more exaggerated. And I like to think this like a coin flip. If you flip the coin 10 times and you get heads 8 out of 10 times, does that mean that the coin is rigged? No, it just means that the effect is going to look larger because you've had less times that you're flipping the coin. But if I flipped it 1,000 times, I'd get closer to a 50-50 split, which is why when you look at smaller sample sizes, the results can look more conflated or exaggerated, especially when you're comparing them to a group where there's more people present. And that's exactly what happened in this study. What's even more interesting is when you actually went over 65, if you had more protein in your diet, it actually appeared more protective because their risk of mortality was lower in all cases. So this is where it gets interesting. She did add a caveat, which is if you're not active at all. And that's the one thing that the study failed to report on, people's levels of physical activity. So we can't determine, only indications we have here are the fact that their BMIs were borderline obese and overweight, and their waist circumferences were also similar across groups, but larger than the average. And here's where it gets interesting. The largest study in this area with over 131,000 people found no association with animal protein and all-cause mortality. And they tracked everything over 32 years, exercise, their fiber intakes as well, the types of animal protein or plant protein they were eating, and things like their alcohol consumption and whether they smoked. And they found an association with protein, but it was evident in highly processed red meats and if they had an additional lifestyle risk factor such as smoking or heavy alcohol consumption or being obese or overweight. So that's what it comes down to, is it's your overall lifestyle that predicts your risk of dying. And that kind of proves the point that maybe protein isn't the problem. but it's what that protein is associated with. Is it more highly processed red meats? Is it to do with the fact that people are physically inactive and the contribution of those two leads to things like an increased risk of disease and dying? I think that's more plausible than saying protein is the cause. And while they didn't categorize vegetarian or vegans in the study, what they did model is what it would look like if you replace 3% of the plant protein with animal protein. If you replaced it by 3% with plants, unprocessed red meat, it was 12% less risk. And with eggs, it was also less as well, which showed that there was a difference in the type of animal protein that you consume and your risk of cancer or mortality overall, which points to the fact that it's probably a quality over a quantity issue, and that if protein was the isolated single variable that was increasing your risk of cancer and mortality, it would have shown up in multiple other studies, and it would have been shown in data to be a consistent finding overall and not just within a specific age group. But none of this makes her a liar. She was describing a real result, and the headline of the paper also looks kind of scary as well, because you will immediately look at that and think, oh my God, high protein diets increase your risk of dying. But there's always a caveat. If you're physically inactive, that will be a major thing to consider, that you need to also be increasing your fiber intake and doing things like physical activity to support a healthier lifestyle. But if you are physically active and you have a higher protein intake, especially as we age, we know that it's protective against things like sarcopenia, becoming frail, and helping you to maintain muscle mass as we age. So don't panic if you're still having chicken breast and rice for lunch. You're absolutely fine. And if you have any questions or would like to know a little bit more about this, I'm going to put the study in the links below so you can check it out for yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.